Looking back on the second day of Formula One pre-season testing at the 5.412-kilometre Bahrain International Circuit in Sakhir, Ferrari certainly tried to give its best, allowing for a clearer overall picture of long-run performance. On Thursday afternoon, the drivers completed an entire Grand Prix, eliminating any doubts about fuel loads and shifting the focus to the handling of the cars and engine power. Lando Norris in the McLaren was overall the fastest, showing an excellent pace with both C3 and C2 tyres. The Englishman benefited from a more stable rear end, allowing him to get on the throttle earlier than his rivals and carry more speed down the straights. Conversely, Ferrari once again struggled with an unstable rear end, preventing Charles Leclerc from extracting the maximum performance. Unlike in the fast lap simulation where the SF-25 seemed to have found a good overall balance in long runs, the Maranello team still needs to refine the setup. Mercedes and Red Bull also carried out similar work to the first day, showing a good car even with the team's younger drivers, Kimi, Antonelli and Lawson. Let's analyse the work done by the various teams. We consider the first stint of each driver with a full fuel load and the third and final stint when the cars were lighter. With a full tank, Oliver Behrman was surprisingly the fastest, almost inadvertently revealing a likely untapped potential in the Ferrari. Lando Norris was the best among the top drivers, gaining slightly overall compared to Charles Leclerc, Kimi Antonelli and Lawson. The Monegasque driver opted for a more cautious approach at the start of the stint, achieving better time progression than the Englishman. From the telemetry data related to degradation, it is also evident that both drivers experienced a drop in performance in the final laps due to some rear-end graining. According to telemetry data, the reigning champion car seems to behave better than the Ferrari in slow corners. The telemetry data considers the average speed at the centre of slow, medium and fast corners during the first stint. Lando Norris is on average 3 km per hour faster than Charles Leclerc, who, due to the more unstable rear end, has to carry less speed through the middle of the corner. Conversely, the Maranello car performs best where aerodynamic load plays a key role thanks to a stiffer setup that enhances aerodynamic efficiency. Mercedes, with Kimi Antonelli, also recorded excellent speed benchmarks, revealing the most balanced car across all sections of the track. On the other hand, Lawson seems unable to extract the maximum from the Red Bull RB21. The blue racing car is significantly behind its direct rivals, struggling considerably to carry speed through the middle of the corner. The aerodynamic and mechanical problems are compounded by an alarm on reliability that emerged yesterday. The limit seems to again stem from the front suspension, which the engineers are focusing on. With a lighter fuel tank, McLaren has widened the gap over its rivals, improving both in corners and at the end of the straights. By combining telemetry data and tyre degradation, it's clear that the Woking team has excellent tyre management and used a more aggressive engine map. From the data collected on Thursday, it is evident that Lando Norris is the only driver with negative degradation on hard tyres. Thanks to the more stable rear end, the Bristol driver experienced less rear end graining, utilising an optimal amount of grip throughout the stint. On the other hand, Ferrari struggled to manage the extra energy being fed into the tyres with a lighter fuel load. Charles Leclerc's car slid more in the slower corners, taking the tyres out of their ideal operating window. When analysing the average speed throughout the entire corner, Ferrari's difficulties in Turn 1 immediately stand out. From the moment braking begins until the drivers return to full throttle on the exit, Charles Leclerc lost about 15 km per hour on average to Lando Norris, a huge gap. This difference is significantly reduced in the faster corners, once again indicating that the team focuses more on aerodynamic work than mechanical work in the slower sections. Mercedes is also very stable in the faster sections of the circuit with a lighter fuel load. Moreover, as seen from the degradation data, Kimi Antonelli is good at tyre management with a relatively low lap time increase, excluding the 2 slowest laps. Finally, let's consider some references regarding corner exit traction and top speeds at the end of the straights. Lance Stroll is the best, maximising the performance of a very soft car under acceleration. Ferrari, on the other hand, is among the slowest cars at corner exit, unable to optimise grip during acceleration. Conversely, Mercedes and McLaren made use of a less stiff setup, allowing for better tyre contact with the track surface. These two teams are the best in terms of speed at the end of the straight. Lando Norris was able to fully exploit the power unit's push during the final stint. The Englishman, also thanks to better traction out of corners, carried about 6 kilometers per hour more than Charles Leclerc. This gap was smaller during the first stint, around 3 kilometers per hour, indicating how the reigning world champion team allowed the English driver more hybrid power. During the second day of testing, Ferrari focused almost entirely on understanding how the aerodynamics work with a fairly stiff setup. In the series of tests carried out, the Maranello engineers opted for a tuning that could stabilize the vehicle chassis, leaving something on the table in the slower sections. On Friday's agenda, thanks to Lewis Hamilton's long run in the afternoon, attention was shifted to the slower areas with lower stiffness to get a complete picture of the SF-25 car's competitiveness. Given Ferrari had been tipped to be McLaren's main threat in the 2025 Formula One season, how it fared in Bahrain testing may have left some wanting. From an encouraging first day where Charles Leclerc seemed to be quite at ease with the new SF-25, the subsequent 2 days of running gave the impression of there being a gap between Ferrari and McLaren. In fact, based on Lando Norris's astonishing long run on the second evening that put him 30 seconds up the road in a like-for-like comparison with the Monegasque driver, indications point to Ferrari not only being behind, but also facing a potential extra threat from the improved Mercedes. Charles Leclerc's Thursday run was almost neck and neck with Kimi Antonelli, who was completing his first ever race run on actual F1 tyres. So clearly has room to do even better as he gets to grips with things. But in trying to evaluate how things shook out this week between McLaren and Ferrari, there is one caveat on reading too much into long-run form: it's testing and not racing. That means you can never be sure that you are comparing apples with apples when looking across different teams. Varying fuel loads and different engine modes can drastically paint the wrong impression when trying to compare cars, and Bahrain this year was even worse for offering clarity because unprecedented cold weather and gusts of wind meant conditions varied all the time. Cool and relatively calm on the first day, it was colder with occasional rain on the second day before the final day was warmer and windier. So where the SF-25 was settled at first, it never got itself back in its initial happy place. The unusual weather also meant that there was potential for some unrealistic conclusions to be reached too, because Bahrain's conditions were a world away from how it will when it comes to the actual race weekend in April. While the number crunching over the next few days will produce some clearer indications about how things stack up across the field, from Ferrari's perspective, little time will be wasted on getting its own team ranking in place. Instead, ahead of the season opener in Melbourne on a vastly different track configuration and surface to what we had this week, all that matters is making sure it is the best position it can be.